This particular webinar is focused on giving you an understanding of what marketplaces are, how they can, empower your e-commerce. How does traditional e-commerce differ from marketplace commerce, and what do you need to be knowing in order to understand how you can move to this model. It's a complex model, so we'll try to make it as easy as we possibly can. I'll start off with a bit of an intro, and then we'll work through it. I think we'll have some time at the end for questions, and I think that will probably be messages that you can send out, and we'll pick them up. But at the end of the call, you should be able to find contacts for us to be able to contact and ask questions aside from what we've told you here. So just a bit of an intro about myself. My name is Shahzad Awan. I'm CEO and co-founder of MarketCube, which is a platform that enables existing online commerce platforms to convert themselves into marketplaces. I have a very extensive technology background, so ex-director for Dentsu, which is one of the largest media agencies, head of global engineering for HSBC, and then also have worked for the likes of Condé Nast, which do Vogue and GQ magazines, and CTO for their platform called style.com, and some of the other places like Not Just a Label, which is an emerging designer marketplace that we worked in. So without further ado, I think the first thing that we need to go through, in my view, would be to try and give you an understanding of what I understand how e-commerce has evolved and where we've ended up today with regards to marketplace commerce. So the evolution of commerce essentially started, obviously, e-commerce has been around for a while, but it started off in the early days when you would be able to go and set up an online store. So the first wave, which I call single entity businesses, within the first wave, you had single channel e-commerce. So you had small online stores coming along. They were selling a few items online, payment processing, all of that stuff was very, very sparse at that time. It was in its infancy. And it took some time to try and understand, how e-commerce is going to change our lives. But it was nice to be able to go and buy stuff online. And some of the early kind of runners on that space, which made a name for themselves, were the people like Amazon, which were selling books, and and eBay, that came on as a bit of an auction site, but it took some time to get going. But generally, it was focused on the desktop. People were logging on very, very, very slow internet connections, and I'm looking to buy stuff, essentially buying stuff and hoping it did arrive at their house. And at that point, there was not that much trust within the e-commerce space either. Moving on from there, we then hit the second wave, which is multi-channel. And what that basically meant was that as commerce started to evolve a bit more, people, as phones started to make a bit of an impact, or iPad kind of devices, mobile devices started to make an impact. Then people started to develop commerce offerings that were for desktop and for mobile. And that meant that they could now follow the customer a bit more. This was also in the early days of when Facebook and platforms like these were coming in, where people were starting to become a lot more social online. And this was starting to make an impact in terms of people being able to go online on their phones and then be able to find an advert online for something to buy and then jump off. This also meant that we also had a bit more of a maturing happening in terms of e-commerce, which meant that people like Amazon had started to expand their catalog from just being books. They started to bring in other things. And hence what it meant was that people had more options to buy online. And the second wave was essentially all the big retailers around the world starting to pick up on the fact that e-commerce could be another way to sell rather than the physical in-store that they were doing. This is a wave that kind of stayed on for quite some time. So I would say that probably continued on from about 2004 to probably about 2008 to 2010. Which basically meant that companies, all big businesses around the world, started to really expand into an online presence. This is also in line with the fact that websites were making a bit of a bit of a place. Everybody now had a website, everybody had an email, and that meant that, you know, everybody understood how to get to a web address. In the first wave, it was obviously very difficult because most people didn't quite understand what a web address was. So things had moved on significantly. Now, once the second wave had moved on, we moved into the third wave, which also exists today. And this is what we call omni-channel. And what this basically means is that companies have invested quite significantly in trying to make sure that the customer can be followed from the point that they interact with a brand, either physically or online, through the various touch points that they would use. So for example, online, they could go to their mobile, they could go to kiosks, self-service points, and actually in-store. And there are companies that have taken a massive leap in terms of pushing this forward. So someone like an Apple, for example, does omni-channel extremely well, whereby once you get into the store, you do realize that, you know, they've already picked up on the fact that you are in store because they've connected it to your phone, and your phone also is now passing all the information across to let them know what they've bought, what they've come in to pick up, and so on and so forth. But for most retailers, there's also this thing at the moment whereby you can go and you can click and collect. For example, you can go and reserve online, or you can buy online and pick up in store, or, you know, you can order something in store for delivery at home. You could also, you know, buy something from third-party channels. So you could, for example, now do buying straight off Instagram or some of the social channels, which will link into your online store, which will then link into your physical warehouse. Now, the omni-channel still continues to this day, and it seems to be a big part of every big retailer's arsenal. But it also means that because the way the technology is gone, it's actually a lot easier now for pretty much even a small size retailer to go omni-channel, because the touch points are so readily available and the technology that support them are so readily available. But what this meant from a single entity business point of view, the reason we call it single entity is because single entity businesses were dependent on stocking everything themselves, right? Which basically meant that you buy the stuff, you stock it into your warehouse, and then, you know, as the orders come in from wherever, you fulfill the orders. The evolution then moved on into what we call multi-entity marketplace businesses or multi-entity businesses. This is essentially the concept where multiple businesses work together to offer value to the end customer. Now, the first wave was affiliate marketplaces, and I'll move through the marketplace paradigm in a bit. Now, affiliate is something that we used to know quite a lot of, and this is where a lot of websites that came along, which were like Compare the Market in the UK, for example, or these compare type sites where you go and search for a product, and it will give you lots of options. You click on a link, and it will take you off to the actual seller's website. Now, these were affiliate marketplaces, and what they basically did was that they were pushing everything across into, they're passing the sale across to the actual seller, and they would earn a small commission, 1.5%, maybe 2% at best, for passing the sale, only if the sale occurred. What that meant was that you were passing traffic across, and if somebody bought something, then you would get a commission back. Now, theoretically, it's a nice model because, you know, there are people out there marketing for you and sending sales to you. But for the affiliate itself as a business, it wasn't a very good business, or it still isn't a very good business, simply because you don't own the customer. You effectively drive the customer to your portal, and then they bounce off from your portal and go straight to the seller. And there isn't really a reason for them to come back to you unless you offer a lot more value. For example, like the insurance market might be, where, you know, people will come back and then search across different insurance providers to see who's the cheapest and then jump off to that one. But if you were looking at more product and you know, the more traditional kind of commerce, affiliate was always very, very difficult. But what that meant was that there was an opportunity to try and connect multiple businesses together and offer value. So in the second wave of multi-entity marketplaces, we got aggregator platforms or aggregator marketplaces. Now, aggregator marketplaces are marketplaces or online shops that basically aggregate products from third parties and then sell it under their brand. The biggest one in the world, obviously, being Amazon right now. And what they basically do is that you interact with Amazon. Amazon has thousands of sellers behind the scenes who push products into the Amazon platform. And as a customer, you go and buy from Amazon. Now, one of the benefits, if you think about what Amazon, and the reason why Amazon's rapidly grown is because of the fact that it has massive numbers of sellers and massive amounts of products, which as a customer, you can go and search for anything and you'll find it, and you can buy it straight off there. But the fulfillment and everything else is kept away. So you don't have to hop around, a thousand suppliers to try and work out which is the best, I don't know, phone that you want to buy, for example, or the best price for the phone that you want to buy. The second wave is also very interesting because the second wave ended up creating huge marketplaces. So you have eBay, you have Amazon, you have Walmart, you have Alibaba, you have all of these aggregator marketplaces, which invited sellers into the marketplace that they had created. They own the customer, they would do the sale. But now, because they own the customer, the commission that they made compared to affiliate is a lot higher. So commission rates within aggregator marketplaces are anywhere between 15 to 30% that they charge per sale, whereas you're making 1.5% on affiliate. But what's happened since then is that because this model is so good and so popular, a lot of people wanted to get in. So there are two types of markets that are formed. One is that there's lots of smaller sellers that will pull some stuff together, pop it onto Amazon, and then just make money off the sales because Amazon gets the customers and they basically sell stuff. But then as these aggregator marketplaces have grown massively, what's happened is that their brand has become bigger than the brand of the seller. So in many cases, businesses struggle to find identity within these aggregator platforms, which means that if you have a premium product that you're selling on Amazon, you cannot guarantee that that product is going to be against another premium product, or it will give it the right kind of presence, because it could be against another product that's sourced very, very cheaply, let's say from China. So your brand can never have that kind of affinity, if to say. Now, what that basically means is from a business perspective, that a lot of businesses then started to realize that if they were sat on Amazon, then their brand will never be able to lift off. They don't have control. They don't have control on who they are pitched against. They don't have control on the customers. What it also meant was that there were instances where Amazon would switch off a seller because they didn't like something about them. Also, the fact that even in UAE, you have Noon, for example, you have Amazon, very similar models, but Noon and Amazon both doing the same thing, that they are now creating their own products. So they can look at the platform, they can work out exactly what's selling, and they can create their own branded products and compete against you in their own marketplace, which puts you at a disadvantage. So that then brought about the third wave of niche marketplaces. Now, niche marketplaces are very interesting because these are marketplaces being created by retailers for their specific niche, for their specific, for example, if you are selling, I don't know, golfing items, then you want to create a marketplace that is a destination for golf. And you want to pull in a lot of different sellers that sell golfing items. But your marketplace is very well known for just being for the golf products. Or if, for example, you have a fashion brand and you wanted to bring in other suppliers in that fashion space that complemented your brand, then you can bring in your third-party sellers into this space. Okay. Now, niche marketplaces tend to work really well because it allows businesses to expand and grow very, very quickly. And we'll go through this model in a little bit. But we're now at the third wave. This is what this presentation is going to focus on, is about the third wave, which is how to create your own marketplace rather than be part of somebody else's marketplace, so that you can take control of what you're selling, what niches you're selling, and so on. Now, just to go back to what I was talking about, the single entity businesses, This effectively is a single entity business logical flow. So I'll just run through this. If you look at this, what it basically says at the moment is that, when we've gone down the model where you have a web store, you have a mobile store, you have a third party, like you're even selling on Amazon, and you have a point of sale terminal in the shop, everything connects back to your warehouse. So whatever stock you have in your warehouse is what you're selling through all of these channels. And then you manage your own fulfillment and delivery. That's basically how the whole model works. Now, if you wanted to expand, you need a bigger warehouse, right? So the cost of logistics effectively is the constraint that you have in terms of expanding your business. Now, when you move into multi-entity businesses, the model changes. It looks very complicated, but it isn't really. So you still have your traditional store, as you can see, right? So you're still selling on all of the various channels that you were selling on before, but now the size of your warehouse has gone down significantly, because you might be selling some items which you source yourself directly and you sell under your brand directly. But then everything else you're passing off to your third-party sellers, right? Which means that either you run delivery for your items, or your third parties run deliveries straight to your customers. Now, what this basically means is that you can expand at an alarming rate, but also the fact that the size of your warehouse is no longer a constraint. The more sellers you can put in, the more products you can offer. Now, one of the golden rules in e-commerce is assortment is everything, which means that the more choice you can give your customers, the more they're likely to buy and the more they're likely to come back. And this is obvious when you look at people like Amazon, and if you look at people like noon.com or whatever, you will see the reason you go to them is because of choice, because they have very, very large inventories that you can look through, but not everything that they sell to you is actually in their warehouse. They're using third parties. Now, just to expand a bit on this, a bit more on the side, if you were to consider that this single entity business is Amazon, and these multi-entity businesses are sellers that are selling on Amazon, then you can see why Amazon has grown so astronomically, because it can offer thousands and hundreds of thousands of products online compared to another store which is currently bound by its warehouse. And this is the real power of what marketplaces give you. Marketplaces, in association with other businesses, gives you the ability to scale very quickly, to offer more choice without you having to invest quite heavily. In fact, the investment model from a marketplace perspective is a lot smaller than you would if you were to set up your own logistics. So essentially, what is a marketplace? So going back to this question that we want to answer today, marketplace effectively is a place, is an online space. If you were to think about like a mall, for example, they can be classed as marketplaces today because this is a single space, for example, where multiple brands exist. The only difference between a mall and an online marketplace is that everybody buys through the mall. Everybody goes to the mall and buys through the brand directly. Within an online marketplace, the model tends to be that you go to the online marketplace, to the operator's online store, and you buy through the online marketplace, which then places the order back into the sellers. So, but in this case, the customer is owned by the marketplace, right? Not by the brand, because that's how you effectively make money on that side. But the main thing about a marketplace is effectively it's a place where multiple brands or multiple sellers can be brought together to sell their products through a single online store that customers interact with. And that's a fairly simplistic view of what a marketplace is. But generally, marketplaces are not limited to physical products. So just keep that in mind, because marketplaces are also other services that you probably now consume quite a lot of. So you might have Deliveroo, you have Talabat here, you have Uber here, you have Careem here. They're all marketplaces. Why? Because they work with third parties that supply or provide the services that you're buying off them. So Careem has all these drivers which effectively are independent businesses. Talabat or Deliveroo, they work with restaurants, which are independent businesses, and the orders are funneled to those independent businesses, and they do the pickup and delivery. So they effectively provide the fulfillment of the service, but the actual service is provided by the third party. So marketplaces can expand into products and services, and also digital products if you wanted. But the element that you always need to keep in mind is that there's always a third party involved doing the fulfilling part of it, or providing the supply side of it, right? You're providing the buy side in terms of getting customers into your online store, giving them the choice to buy, but then when they buy, it goes off. And there are various fulfillment models, which we'll cover in a little while, which talks about who fulfills the order at the end of the day. Right. Now, types of marketplaces that we've talked about, hopefully the marketplace concept is clear now, but there are three types of marketplaces that we've talked about. There are third-party marketplaces, which is what I call Amazon, eBay, Walmart, Buy, Sears, whatever. Now, these are marketplaces that exist, and people sell into those, their products, which the customers buy. And these are brands that you will work against. Then companies set up what we call hybrid marketplaces, whereby they will sell on their own website, so using a Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento store, but then they also sell on Amazon and so on and so forth, which means that they have a dual strategy, whereby they'll be selling the same item on Amazon, but they're also trying to sell it off their own site. A lot of companies stick into hybrid mainly because they probably get more sales coming through Amazon and Walmart and so on, but they also want to try and build up their own presence over time. But in many cases, what we've seen is that they sell only their products or kind of products that they have, and then they'll sell everything else on Amazon. The private marketplaces is the third option, whereby companies own their online platforms, they create their own marketplace, they get their own direct vendor relationships, and they provide the inventory if they can, or through the third parties, and the fulfillment side of it. So a lot of the way that we talk about where marketplaces are moving, if you look at the businesses that I've talked about, Amazon, eBay, Talabat, Noon, all of these companies theoretically are actually private marketplaces because they own their own platforms. They create their own marketplaces, they bring their own sellers, and they sell and fulfill to their own customers. However they fulfill at the back end is down to how they set the relationship up with their sellers, but effectively they are private marketplaces. So if you wanted to create your own Amazon, or if you wanted to create your own eBay or Etsy or anything like that, then theoretically you're trying to create a private marketplace, your own brand where people buy from. One of the biggest challenges though for creating marketplaces is the technology infrastructure. So there's something that we highlighted on, sorry, we've gone the wrong way, 1 second. So I put a red dot here, which I will explain a bit later on, but this red dot is the technology infrastructure that you need to connect your online store or your online store's presence to your third parties. And this is the glue that effectively allows all of this, fulfillment and order management and product management to happen between the two parties involved. So we'll cover that in a little bit. But private marketplaces are effectively where these companies have grown. The hybrid strategies that we've seen generally don't tend to be that great because companies are kind of caught between the two. So if companies want to go and expand into a marketplace model, then private marketplaces is essentially the way to go. Now, why should you be considering a marketplace? And that's effectively a timely question, right? So what we're saying is that you should be looking at creating marketplaces, great. But if you are creating marketplaces, then what you should be doing is thinking about how quickly you want to scale. If you want to scale fast, marketplace, bring in third parties, their products, you don't have to worry about it. You reduce logistics costs. Obviously, the size of your warehouse goes down significantly if your third parties are doing the fulfillment. So imagine, as an example, if for every order that Deliveroo picked up, they had to cook and deliver it, they would never be able to scale the way that they have, or Talabat the same way. But if other kitchens are just making the orders and they just pick up and deliver, they can have thousands of them very, very quickly. So again, in a physical sense, you don't need to have a warehouse to put all the products in. That reduces your logistics cost. It also offloads it, which means that you can automate the whole process through technology. You can work with third-party sellers, as many as you want, because there's no limit to digitally connecting with third-party sellers, right? But the biggest one for me, I suppose, is that you offer more choice, right? If you were to go onto a store and you did not find a lot of products, and you went to another store and you found a huge amount of them, you are more partial to going back there. So assortment is everything. So to get more choice to your customers, the easiest way is to connect with third-party sellers that complement your product choices. And also the fact that for every sale that they make for a third-party seller's product, you actually get commission. And as we mentioned earlier, commission rates are a lot higher on this side, on the marketplace side, anywhere between 15 to 30%. But one of the biggest things is that you reduce the time to market, and that is very, very important, because if you are to set up your whole operation in terms of logistics, warehouse, people, hiring, everything, it will take a long time to get your operations together, right? But if you were to connect somebody and they already have an operation running, then the time it takes you to actually get your marketplace set up, it's actually getting the technology infrastructure in place, which we'll talk about a bit later, and then getting the vendors onboarded and their products onboarded. And that's the business process, right? Once you've done that part, that's your major cost, right? If you're looking at platforms like a MarketCube, for example, then the cost of that implementation, if you're looking at Shopify, whatever, the cost is a lot cheaper than you having to build all of this from scratch, because it will take you up to 9 months to a year, as opposed to a month, which is what we say we do. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is that there are, this is Ecommerce, but it works on every other level as well, on Shopify, on WooCommerce, and so on. But the marketplaces operate in various ways at the moment. So one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that there are terms that you probably are familiar with in the market: drop shipping, consignment, click and collect. But I'll explain what these are in context of a marketplace, and how you set your marketplace up to provide services. So drop shipping, very simple. The order comes in, you forward the order to the vendor or the supplier or the seller, and they basically ship the order back out to your customers directly, which means that what you're dealing with is you're getting the orders from the customer, you getting it through the buy funnel, you forwarding that order on to your vendor or your seller. The seller then basically fulfills the order and ships it out directly. Now, this is the cheapest model in terms of a marketplace, because the logistics is literally non-existent as far as you're concerned. The other one, however, is consignment, which is a model that seems to be getting more popular because businesses want to get in the middle of the process. So they don't want to warehouse everything. They don't want to, create warehouses or anything like that. But what they want to do is they want to make sure that when the order comes in, they basically forward the order onto a seller or a supplier, and they will then send the products back to the operator in this case, and the operator will then send it out to the customer. So what we haven't talked about at the moment is the different roles that exist within a marketplace. So the operator is the one who actually runs the marketplace for the customer, and seller, vendor, operator are the same terms used for the seller of the product or your third parties that you're dealing with. Now, consignment is a model. There are two types of model. There's a consignment ship, and then there's a consignment pickup. Now, consignment ship is where a third party would basically sell the products or send the products back to the operator's warehouse, and then the operator will ship it out. The other one would be where a seller would basically inform the operator saying, look, the product's ready for pickup. They will pick up and then do the last mile delivery to their customers. Now, one of the things that some of you might or might not be aware of is Amazon FBA, which is fulfillment by Amazon. And that's effectively kind of like a consignment model, where sellers place their products into Amazon warehouses, and then Amazon can offer that to their customers through a Prime model, which is they can guarantee delivery because the items sit with Amazon. But theoretically, it's not Amazon managing inventory. It's because it charges, the sellers for putting their items in a known warehouse, but does the last mile delivery. Now, Amazon generally does all the last mile delivery for items which are FBA, but you will also be able to pick up orders which will be sent to you directly from sellers as well. Well, certainly in the UK, we tend to get that from time to time, where items might be bigger or bulkier. They don't put it inside Amazon's warehouses. So the consignment model also exists, where you might have something like an on-demand kind of a situation where somebody's ordered something, you connect with the seller. The seller says it'll be ready in X number of days, so you pick it up. Then you want to put it into your own packing, for example. So one of our customers, Savvy Fashion, for example, will be looking to do a consignment model where once this is a marketplace for emerging designers, so they would be picking up the orders and they will be putting them into their own branding and then sending them out, which means they're doing a consignment model in order to maintain their brand to their customers. But they also hide away the vendors to a degree, because they do talk about the designers, but the designers don't want to deal with the shipping, which also works out well for them. The other model that we're quite aware of nowadays is click and collect, whereby you go to a store's website, you go online, like you go to Apple online, you book something, you go to the store and pick it up. But multi-vendor or multi-seller click and collect is something that's coming through, and it seems to be a nice model whereby, for example, if you wanted to take, let's say, a city or a little mall or whatever online, so that people could basically go online, choose products from multiple businesses, physical businesses, and then basically buy them out, buy the products, and then basically go and click and collect it. So this is effectively a third-party click and collect, rather than going to Apple and then doing a click and collect from that. Now, this also means that this brings the omni-channel nature into marketplaces as well now, which basically means that you can now go from online to a third party's offline store and do your own collections. This is something that I think is going to grow a lot more, especially within the mall space, or within where you have lots of businesses together, or even like a city town kind of level. We have a couple of instances like this whereby we've had all islands go online, small islands go online in a click and collect kind of model, whereby you can buy online and then collect it from the island, but they also do marketplaces as a delivery model. And then we've got time slot services, or services as such. Now, services is essentially everything we've talked about, like Uber, Talabat, anything that you can effectively buy as a service, and somebody else will fulfill that for you. So whether we have Savvy Weddings, which is coming along as well, which is to do with all wedding services. So you can book makeup artists, for example, and then they will provide the service to you. You can, if you look at personal trainers, for example, you can do the same thing. If you look at Talabat, Uber, whatever, they're all time-based services, which means you book somebody out for a time and they provide a service. Once they provided the service, you do your commission calculations and pay them out. But in terms of operating a marketplace, you need to be very careful about which model you want to go with. And generally starting from, on screen from left to right tends to be the way, unless you're a services marketplace. But dropshipping is by far the most common. Dropshipping has had a bit of a bad reputation over time, because there's a lot of people who are doing dropshipping in terms of getting product from China, or have set themselves up in Bali and then sending products out, and they were never the same. But again, we're talking about a private marketplace whereby the vendors, who they are, what they sell. Now, whether they're selling property or whether they're selling services or they're selling physical products, whatever it is, in this model, if you know your vendors, you will have the ability to create that relationship, which will allow you to not only manage the fulfillment chain, but also be able to provide a good service to your end customers. Right. So how does a marketplace operate? And we touched on this lightly earlier on, but marketplace basically has three main actors and a fourth actor, right? So there's the buyer, right? The buyer obviously is the one who's buying the products from the online store. So assuming a buyer lands on Amazon, Amazon is the app operator here. And Amazon has multiple sellers, third parties that basically provide products either directly or through the consignment model into Amazon's warehouses. And Amazon then does the shipping of the products to the buyer, assuming it's in their warehouse, or the seller does the shipping. Now, the fourth item here is the shipping provider, as we've talked about. Now, this is a bit of a silent shipping provider because shipping is also a very complex subject within marketplaces. It tends to get very complex if you don't quite understand what you're trying to do here. The main thing to work out is that who does the shipping at the end of the day? Is it you or is it the seller? That's one thing. The other one is who pays for the shipping? Are you paying for shipping and your seller is just, packing the items and then sending them out, i.e. you provide the shipping labels? Or is your seller doing all the shipping? And the thing to keep in mind is that from a user experience point of view, from a buyer's experience point of view, one of the biggest sticking points is the cost of shipping. So let's say you buy an item for $10 and your shipping comes out to be $8. I don't think you're going to buy it, right? Because it just doesn't make sense. So in many cases, it's about who absorbs the cost of shipping. And again, that's a really, really big topic to talk about in this particular webinar. But it's the fourth actor in this, which determines a lot of how the buyer is actually going to interact with your product. You also want to be able to provide a lot of kind of merchandise options, right? So you want to be able to say free shipping and so on and so forth. So again, when you're thinking about creating a marketplace, you need to think about your buyer generally won't know much difference other than the fact that they have a huge amount of choice compared to a single entity business. But the thing that they would find very jarring would be the fact that they have to pay for shipping. The other thing is that within a marketplace construct, generally what tends to happen is that you tend to let your customers know that this is being fulfilled by X vendor. So if you go to Amazon, you will see the vendor name, who's the supplier for that particular product. Now, if you're buying from multiple suppliers, multiple products, and you put them into a single checkout, and if each seller is providing their own shipping rates, it tends to get quite different, right? So you might have similar kind of products being offered by two different sellers that you bought, but one is charging $8, the other one is charging $4. So that tends to become a bit confusing for the end customer. So you need to think about those things. But again, you need to understand that you own the buyer as an operator, but you also own the relationship with the seller. So you are key in this process. And then you need to decide whether you own the shipping relationship directly, which means you pay for all of that, your seller only does the picking and the packing, or your seller owns the full shipping fulfillment, and whether they're using a third-party shipping provider like a DHL or FedEx or whatever to do the ship outs, or even if it's a local delivery kind of model. Again, in interest of time, I'm going to try and shift as quickly as I can. So now the marketplace operations, there are various roles and responsibilities. And this is where I think we're starting to get a bit more real about how do you actually get a marketplace going. So you own the customer, you have an online platform, you get the customers to your online store. That's your responsibility as an operator. Then the operator's role is, they provide the front end store, they collect the payments, they manage payouts to the vendors, depending on what your commission setup is per sale. They're also responsible for the marketing side of the online store. And they're also responsible for getting the vendors, who are their private relationships that they get into the system. Then there is this automation that happens in the middle that sits between the operator and the vendor. In this case, we're talking about, because see, the customer is effectively sat on an e-commerce platform like a Shopify or a WooCommerce or a BigCommerce. That's where you've set up your online store. But the online store doesn't understand that your products are actually coming from multiple sellers. And that part is actually managed by a marketplace platform. And the marketplace platform is more focused on the operator to vendor relationship. So it's about onboarding the vendor onto the platform, getting their products into the platform, and then getting their orders, their products published onto the online store. And when orders come back in, is splitting those orders back to the vendors, making sure that they fulfill the orders, and then managing the payments out to the vendors in terms of, if you sold something for $100 and you're charging 20% commission, then $80 need to be paid back to the vendor. So those kinds of management and accounting has to be done by the marketplace platform. They're also responsible for a lot of the automation, the data flow that goes between the systems and connecting into vendor systems and making sure the inventories are updated and all that stuff, so that the buyer doesn't get like an experience whereby they're buying stuff and it's out of stock and things like that. The marketplace platform is also the one responsible for setting up the workflows in terms of what gets published, reviewing the products that are coming through, but also looking at the shipping side of things, right? In terms of is it a drop ship, is it fulfillment, is it consignment, how does the product get broken down and who's going to do the fulfillment? So a lot of that complexity is contained within a marketplace platform. But in terms of an operator, you're essentially sat between two systems. You sit between your e-commerce system and you sat between your marketplace platform, and you have your relationship with your vendor, which is then coming in via the marketplace platform, adding everything that is required, and then pushing it across into the online e-commerce platform for the customer to see and buy. Right. So just as a very quick way, this is to explain how a flow works. So a vendor will add a product into their marketplace account. It will then appear onto the operator side of the account in their marketplace platform. They will review and publish that. It will then end up on an online store running on Ecommerce, for example. A customer would come along and buy multiple products. So we're talking about 4 or 5 different products from different vendors, and then check out in a single flow, right? So they would add 5 items and then just do a checkout, which is what we call a multi-vendor order. The order is then received back into the marketplace platform, which then splits everything and forwards it onto each vendor. The vendors receive their part of the order, and then they will then basically go ahead and fulfill their parts of the order. The customer receives the notifications. After the order is fulfilled, payouts are done to the vendors, and the payouts are triggered to the vendors, and the vendor receives their payout minus the marketplace fees. That's basically just a general flow of how a marketplace will deal with how orders are coming through, or how the flow works from one end, which is from a third-party business, down to your customer, then back to your third party, and you sitting in the middle and facilitating all of that. Again, this is another logical view. This is how MarketCube basically works, whereby you've got an e-commerce platform that sits independent. You have a marketplace platform that sits in the middle, but then you have your private vendors, as we've talked about, which can add products in this point here through their vendor portals, or they can connect their own systems. This effectively is a bi-directional flow whereby products go out to your store and orders go back to your vendors, and order fulfillment and updates go back to your online store, back to your customers. So I just wanted to cover this very quickly, because this tends to be a big part that tends to come up, is how do vendors get paid in a marketplace? And generally speaking, when a sale happens, the money goes into a gateway. And I'm going to touch on this very, very quickly, because it tends to come up a fair bit and is a bit of a complex thing. But generally, if a customer goes on, they will go online and they will, with their credit card, pay online, and the money goes through the gateway and into an e-wallet, right? Now, in this case, we're going to use Shopify as an example, Stripe as an example. The money goes into an e-wallet. Now, within the marketplace platform construct, now once the order comes in, the money, let's say you collected $100 for 3 orders, right? And in this case, let me just close that down a bit if I can. Right. So if you look here at the moment, what we've got is we've got a great jacket priced at $100 that came from vendor A. We have blue jeans that came from vendor B, and we had red shoes that came from vendor C. Now, what that basically means is that we have a total value of 290. And then there are various commission structures that were set up against the different vendors, 10%, 10%, and 20%, which means that the total payout required is 249. But what the multi-vendor platform does, it then takes the whole value, splits it down by each vendor, And then when the payment is due, depending on payment terms and everything else, the money is then triggered into we make a trigger into an e-wallet, which says, can you pay vendor A, B, and C their respective amounts that are due to them? And that's how generally multi-vendor payments work. Now, there are other complexities to think about, because you're only making commission. So your sale or your earnings are actually just the commission. It's not the full amount. So you need to then send the full amount across into the vendor, and you'll need so like automated invoices generated and so on, just to make sure that, you know, the accounting is kept clear. But I won't go into that in this call. But this is essentially what we need to think about when we're thinking about payouts. And again, payouts can be very complex, but you know, there are tools and systems available now which make it easier. But you need to understand that everything in a marketplace is multi-vendor, which means that, you know, what you're trying to do is to sell 7 items to a customer as a single transaction, but then at the back end, you're creating 7 separate transactions and making sure that every seller gets their part, their money, and, you know, all of their information due to them. So moving on to the last part, because we're getting close to the end of the hour. Launching your marketplace. Again, marketplaces are complex. I will not sugarcoat that by any stretch of the imagination. But one of the things to keep in mind is that there are platforms that make it a lot easier, ours being one of them. You can launch one in an hour. But the one thing to keep in mind is that whilst the technology part has moved on massively now, right? So you can actually launch a marketplace through technology processes. You can snap an e-commerce platform, a marketplace platform, and get the whole process running end to end in an hour. The thing that takes time, though, is understanding, you know, 2 major parts. One is, what will you sell? So think about the niches that work best for you. And if you're already an online business and you're already selling, then how can you sell more within your own niche? How can you bring in third parties that can, you know, complement what you're selling and also augment what you're doing, right? So what will you sell is actually a very, very big thing. And from our experience, and we've been doing this for a few years now, niches work really best. If you try to be an Amazon today, it's not going to work, because the amount of products and vendors that you need to get in, it will be brutal for you to try and get through that. But the thing is, niches work best because you can concentrate your marketing efforts and you can concentrate your messaging out to your customers in a far better way. The other thing to take into consideration, though, and it's probably the biggest thing to take into consideration, is the fact that working with third parties is difficult. It takes time. This is not a technology process. This is a business process. So if you think that you're going to get 100 sellers on board to start selling, every time you go to a business, right, their understanding of your business model, their understanding of marketplaces, their understanding of technology, their understanding of, you know, how to upload products, have they done this before, what is their online presence, means that every single vendor is going to come in at a different level. Now, give you specific examples. If we were to look at, let's say, the emerging designers, most of them sit on Instagram. They don't really do, I'm talking about savvy fashion here, so they don't really do online stores. And hence for them, it's like difficult to get their product catalogs together because they just used to throwing stuff up. If you look at Savvy Weddings, which we were talking about, which is the suppliers of services to weddings, there are small businesses that run on contacts and things like that. So they're not very digitally savvy. So getting them on board takes time. And it also means that you have to end up doing a lot of work to begin with for them until you can develop you know, enough understanding within your niche to give your sellers all the tools that they need to be able to effectively work. Now, what I mean by tools, I mean the knowledge, the documentation, the training, because that will be required no matter what you do, no matter how good the platform is. Dependent on how your sellers are set up or they have experience, it will cause problems. But these 2 things are probably the biggest things. So to give you an example, if you were to launch a marketplace, you can get the whole marketplace technology setup done in a day. I can guarantee you that. But it will probably take you 29 days to get your your business process is sorted out, right? And this is working out shipping, right? That's a big problem. So when we talk about third parties, we talk about shipping. So when we're talking about shipping, if you're doing localized shipping, it's a lot easier. If you're doing international shipping, then you have to work out who pays for the shipping, how much is it going to cost, how is it going to get delivered, who's going to be, are you going to do consignment, are you going to do drop ship? All of these things become a bit of, a bit problematic. So third parties, whenever they're involved, will take time. And again, they're not going to work to your timeline. And again, this is, whilst there are integrations out of the box available for shipping providers, getting your account set up, getting the right rates, getting the discounts, whatever, depending on if you're doing the shipping, does take time. The other one is the one that vendors will generally ask you for, or sellers will generally ask you, how will you pay me? Right? And this is payment solution. Now, within Europe, US, it's fairly easy. We can use PayPal, Stripe, but as you move towards the other regions, it doesn't work that easily, right? So how do you pay them? What is the process that you will use to pay them out? Would you use a local payout solution, and so on? And again, that is a conversation you would have with your marketplace platform to say, how do we work through this? But working through all of this, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that just like any other business, right? A marketplace as a business requires a plan, requires a business plan, requires you to understand these four things, right? I haven't touched on technology yet. I'll do in a minute. What will you sell? The business processes, how are you going to contact vendors? How are you going to source vendors? How are you going to onboard vendors as a business process? Your terms and conditions, your privacy policies, your payment terms, your commission structure. All of that stuff has to be built up and put in front of them so that they basically, sign on and move on. Understanding what your dependencies are going to be, third parties, shipping providers, payment providers, making sure that you understand who those are and how they will impact your launch, and so on. The next part, or the last part to cover off, is essentially understanding technology. Now, technology as an enabler has come a long way. I mean, when Amazon built its platform, there was nothing there. And a lot of companies that come along nowadays still end up spending hundreds of thousands of pounds trying to build the platform. And they're still building it. I mean, these are massive things to build. But also the fact that if you start to go down the build route, it will take you, or will cost you a lot more time, right? Which means that a normal build cycle for a decent marketplace, we guess, is anywhere between 9 to 12 months for launch, for MVP. If you buy, you can get stuff off the shelf and you can get out to market very quickly. But again, the thing to keep in mind is that whatever technology you get, we believe we can get you 90-95% there, but there are still 5% nuances which you will dream up at night, which are completely not feasible and not useful, but because you haven't thought through, you will end up building them or wanting to go after them, which will then cost you time. So in terms of launching a marketplace, I would suggest you always buy, get to an MVP, and then try to iterate and see where you want to get to. The other one is to keep in mind is that there is a one solution approach versus a hybrid approach. The one solution approach is they give you the front end, they give you the back end, they give you literally everything, and then you set up a marketplace, but they are limited by what they can do. Most companies don't operate like that. Most companies have an online presence already, and for them to basically move to another online commerce platform is going to be very, very difficult. That change management is going to cost a year anyway. The other one is you use your existing systems and snap onto that something that will help build in that multi-vendor capability or the seller management capability, which is where we sit. And hybrid approaches tend to be more cost effective, but also more time friendly. But again, it depends on how you want to build. There are questions around, for startups, always the question is, do I own the IP and all that kind of stuff? Well, you don't own AWS or Google, so it's effectively an infrastructure question. So we can go down that route, talk about it when we can speak to you guys. But generally speaking, launching a marketplace, just to round things off, because I realize I've got 3 minutes left, it's not as difficult as it used to be. It can be done very, very quickly. As an e-commerce strategy, you need to be looking at bringing in third parties. You need to be able to augment your inventory. You want to be able to give more choice. And if you want to expand and scale without hitting your your bank balance, then this is probably the best way to go about it. That's all I have to say for today, I think. My name is Shazad. Thank you. Thanks. Bye.